Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining us today. We are taking something that you might have always thought of as just a standard personality test, and we're going to completely flip it on its head. We're transforming it into a dynamic, highly actionable leadership operating system. We're diving deep into the Predictive Index, or PI for short, and specifically, we're looking at how you can map your organization's strategic priorities directly to PI reference profiles. So let's just jump right into it.
Now, here's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Why do brilliant strategies fail? We see it all the time. An executive team retreats off-site, they spend weeks hammering out this flawless, brilliant strategic plan, and then, well, it just completely falls flat. But why? Because organizations are usually pretty great at choosing their strategic priorities, but they fail entirely because they lack the actual behaviors needed to execute them. Strategy doesn't just execute itself, right? People execute strategy, and if you don't have the specific behaviors aligned with your goals, man, even the absolute best strategy is going to sink.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the leadership operating system. 2, we'll break down the 4 behavioral factors. 3, understanding reference profiles. 4, strategic workforce design. And finally, number 5, mapping profiles to priorities.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the Leadership Operating System, your team's owner's manual.
Okay, I want you to really picture this for a second. What if, on your very first day managing a brand new employee, you were handed a literal owner's manual for them, like a guide that explicitly lays out what naturally fires them up versus what absolutely drains their energy, how they prefer to communicate, and exactly how they're likely to react under stress? Well, that is exactly what PI reference profiles serve as. They aren't about shoving people into rigid little boxes. Instead, they give you this incredible predictive behavioral blueprint so you can finally stop treating everyone the exact same way and actually start personalizing how you lead.
Moving right along to Section 2, the 4 behavioral factors, the science of PI. Now, the Predictive Index Behavioral Assessment has actually been around for about 65 years. They've analyzed millions of assessments, and the entire foundation of it all rests on these 4 core factors. First up, dominance. That's the drive to exert influence on people or events. Second is extroversion, the drive for social interaction. Third is patience, which is the drive for consistency, stability, and a steady pace. And fourth, formality, the drive to conform to rules, structure, and precision. You see, every single person has a completely unique cocktail of these 4 drives, and that is what dictates their workplace behavior.
And this leads to probably the biggest aha moment from the Predictive Index. Behavior always makes perfect sense once you understand the underlying needs. It's not just random. If an employee has a super high drive for extroversion, they have a fundamental hardwired need for social interaction and public recognition. If you stick that person in a back room all alone with a spreadsheet, you are completely violating their needs. And guess what? Their performance is going to tank. But when you actually satisfy those needs, people really shine. Which brings us to Section 3, understanding reference profiles, 17 behavioral blueprints. So out of all those millions of assessments, PI managed to identify 17 recurring behavioral patterns, and they divided them into analytical, social, stabilizing, and persistent families. Just look at the contrast here on the screen. Over on the left, we've got the strategist. They're part of the analytical family. They are fast-paced, highly independent, and intensely focused on results and analytical problem solving. But then, contrast that with the collaborator on the right from the social family. The collaborator, they thrive on empathy, support, team cohesion, and a ton of communication. It's pretty obvious, right? If you manage these 2 radically different people the exact same way, you are gonna fail at least one of them. And this contrast brilliantly illustrates how great leaders use these profiles to completely personalize their coaching. Let's say you're managing a captain profile. Now, captains are fiercely independent, very fast-paced, and they just love driving change. The old school way of coaching them when they're moving too fast and making mistakes is just telling them, hey, slow down. But telling a captain to slow down literally violates their natural drive. They'll just get incredibly frustrated. The PI way, though, you ask a targeted question, something like, what details need to be true for this idea to succeed? See what you did there? You aren't crushing their need for speed. You're actually coaching them to balance that awesome innovation with solid execution. All right, on to Section 4, strategic workforce design, beyond the resume. One of the biggest mistakes organizations make is assuming that career development just means handing out a shiny new title. But real development, it's about finding the environment that actually aligns with a person's natural strengths. Take the strategist again. They are going to absolutely crush it in environments that demand big picture innovation and product leadership. An operator who brings high patience and formality will absolutely excel in quality control and process improvement, basically anywhere that requires stability and precision. A persuader naturally belongs in sales or business development, where their high extroversion can really shine. And a scholar? They'll love diving deep into technical expertise and research. When you align that natural behavioral profile to the role, you don't just get good work, you unlock exceptional performance. Now for the main event, Section 5, Mapping Profiles to Priorities, Executing the Strategy. This right here is where PI transforms into a massive, heavy-hitting strategic tool. It is all about mapping your priorities directly to these profiles. Let's say your macro business goal for the year is operational excellence. Okay, so what behaviors does that actually require? Well, you need high patience and high formality. You intentionally need people who love rules, who crave consistency, and who demand precision. We're talking about profiles like operators, guardians, and controllers. On the flip side, if your strategic priority is sudden, disruptive innovation, an operator is going to seriously struggle with that. For innovation, you need high dominance and low formality. You need the rule breakers, the ones who naturally push boundaries and drive wild new ideas forward, your mavericks, venturers, and captains. The takeaway here is absolutely crucial. You must map your specific business priority directly to the behavioral blueprint required to pull it off. And really, that leads us to a massive paradigm shift. Strategy is executed through behavior. We have got to stop hiring and building teams based entirely on bullet points on a resume or past job titles. We need to start designing our workforces based on the required behavioral strengths. Listen, people rarely fail because they lack raw talent. They fail because they get dropped into environments that fight their natural drives, or because they're asked to execute a strategy that fundamentally contradicts their own behavioral profile. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative question to chew on today. Does your team actually have the behaviors required for your strategy? I mean, you might have the most perfect plan mapped out on paper, but if you haven't mapped the right predictive index reference profiles to those goals, you are literally fighting an uphill battle. Take a hard look at your strategic priorities, look at your team's behavioral blueprints, and start connecting those dots. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I really hope this helps you build a much more intentional, high-performing team.